Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be part 10 of the story, and I was just reading through my notes this morning trying to wrap my brain around everything that happened in this next part, and I feel like this is going to be one of the most tricky or difficult ones to explain just because there are so many different plans and ideas and things that happen that I don't feel comfortable talking about, and I'm gonna try my best to get through it, but I feel like it's gonna be frustrating or difficult to follow when there's things that I don't want to talk about. So I just wanted to say that up front. I also just wanted to start with a big thank you to anyone who is watching and following my story or leaving supportive comments. It means a lot. I have a lot of anxiety posting these videos every time a new one goes up, and more of the story gets out there. It's just extremely nerve-wracking for me because I know this is a public platform and I've been on YouTube long enough to know, people can say whatever they want, and I'm just really appreciative of the supportive comments that I've received, and also to those of you who are able to contribute to the GoFundMe. Huge thank you. Honestly, it's just so touching because most of you don't know me personally, and it means a lot, and it's helping our family, get back on our feet and start our life back in Canada. Okay, so we are now on day 48, which is a Friday, and this day starts off with another one of those random side tangents, but I thought I would include it nonetheless. So there's a lot of volcanoes in Nicaragua, and none of them erupted at any point in time when we were living there, but one of them did. On this day, the volcano on Amatepe Island erupted, and it wasn't a huge eruption, but it was all over, my Facebook and everything that I was seeing, and just already being in a heightened level of anxiety. It was nerve-wracking because it's only it's half an hour away to the lake. It's a volcano surrounded by a lake, so it's half an hour away to the lake, and then it's on an island in the middle of the lake. So I wasn't super concerned necessarily, but knowing volcanoes and the ash they can produce, I was extremely nervous for my husband at this point because I didn't know if the ash would be coming into our town, and the fact that he is in a jail cell and it's just open windows and bars essentially. If that did happen, you wouldn't be able to kind of close things up. So anyways, luckily the ash and the smoke didn't come our way. It was fine, but I just wanted to add that side tangent. So at 1 o'clock that afternoon, I missed a phone call from a number that I didn't recognize, and I didn't think too much about it. There's often numbers that call me that I don't recognize. However, at 3:30 that afternoon, I received a text message from that same number, and it says, "Hi, I'm blank, blank's mother," and basically she wanted to meet the next day for mediation. So this was the mother of the man who passed away, and I hadn't had any direct communication with her up till this point, so it definitely caught me off guard. I remember being hopeful at this point because last I heard they were fighting over mediation and weren't ready to really do anything. So I was hopeful with this text message, but it definitely rattled me a little bit. I immediately messaged my lawyer, Michelle, because she had told me that all communication needs to go through her first, and she didn't respond. And some time went by, not a lot of time, but I was feeling really anxious about the situation, and I decided to reach out to Greg to see what he had to say, and he actually had another phone number for her. So he reached out to her, and they both ended up calling me back on a three-way call. She basically advised me that it wouldn't be smart to have communication with the family right now, given everything that was going on and things that I can't talk about, and that she wanted to wait for Monday to go back to the police station to speak with that man and see what was happening with that whole situation that didn't end up working out anyways, the thing that we were not to talk about, and just did not want me meeting with her the next day. I have to be honest that I really struggled with that. I knew that all week I was just wanting them to be ready to mediate, and now they're saying that they're ready to mediate, and my lawyer is telling me not to meet with them that weekend, and I wasn't understanding, and I wasn't happy about it, and I very much wanted to mediate. However, she advised me to let her know that I wasn't doing well, which is true, and that I needed to rest all weekend, and that I would get a hold of her after the weekend. So I messaged her back, basically just saying thank you, that I wasn't in a good state, that I needed to rest this weekend, which again is true. I had just come out of surgery. The last thing I should be doing is running around to all these police stations and lawyers' offices and all the things I've been doing. I should be resting, but also I very much wanted to mediate, so it was a really hard text message to send. And I could see again on WhatsApp that she read it, but she didn't reply. Another thing that happened that afternoon is that the government of Canada had responded to the embassy and basically wanted some sort of document written. So my lawyer and Nathan at the embassy were writing this document. Basically Canada wanted to know if any of his human rights were being broken. So they were putting together that document. This is also when we started having different family members from my side and from my husband's side reaching out, seeing if they could help in any way, asking if they could contact people and their members of parliament in Canada to just raise awareness to this issue. And again, I have to remind you that we were all just extremely nervous about that at this point. We didn't want to rock the boat at all. We didn't know if that would actually make his situation worse. We already knew it was in the hands of the embassy and that they were doing everything that they could. So we asked people to hold off at that point. I also have notes written down about communicating with friends and family back home. And I know I haven't talked much about that, but I was mostly communicating with my friend. Her name's Nicole, by the way. She's been on my channel once before, and she might come on at the end of this story just to kind of help me wrap things up. But I was mostly communicating with her, and then she had created a group chat to update all my other friends, and that was extremely helpful because, of course, going through everything I was going through and then adding the surgery onto it, I did not have the capacity to keep re-explaining to person after person what was happening, because every day was like a brand new day. Every day there was something, well, you guys know, you've heard the story, every day there was something crazy that happened and something that took a long time to explain. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to just filter that through her, and she was able to filter it to everybody else. And then I was also communicating with my mom as well. So I just had to update those two people, and then the word got out as to what was happening. And at this point, with this plan that again didn't work out, we still weren't telling anybody. So I just have notes written down about like what to say, basically that things might be happening, but that we can't talk about it. Day 49 and 50 were a weekend, and I have written down that weekends are long and hard, even for my in-laws. During the week, like Monday to Friday, I felt like we always had hope and we always had motivation, and things were happening, and we're constantly waiting for the next thing to happen and the next plan. And so yeah, it was a lot easier to get through a week. And then as soon as Friday hit and I realized that whatever plan or whatever was in motion that week wasn't working out, it became extremely difficult. And we just, knew that nothing was going to happen on the weekend. It's like time slowed down. And so yeah, that was the weekend. At this point, again, I'm not putting this on all the days, but at this point my kids are in Canada, and so I'm having phone calls with them as often as I can. Again, still very difficult because I'm still very weak and I'm still dealing with all the trauma that I'm currently dealing with. But when I get on a phone call with them, I want to be positive and, not in a bad place. So phone calls was really, really difficult with them at this point, and I was missing them incredibly. I didn't know when I would see them again, because at this point, another thing I didn't mention is that after my surgery, I couldn't fly for 6 weeks. So I knew that after that surgery date, even if my husband got out, I still couldn't fly home. Obviously, he could have flown home, but I couldn't have. So I knew that I had 6 weeks. And then also we just didn't know when he was going to get out. So every time I had a phone call with them, it was just devastating because I couldn't get them any sort of answer. I couldn't tell them when we were going to see them again. And then I also have notes written down about my arm. At this point, I think we're over 2 weeks post-surgery, and my arm was still not back. It was definitely better than when I first came out of surgery, and it was just like the extreme pounding and the pins and needles, but it was still very much numb. There was still the pains and needles. It was still significantly weaker than my other hand. And what they had told me in the hospital is that like it should come back, it'll come back soon. And after 2.5 weeks, it's still very much hadn't. So I can update you at this point. Again, I'm like 3.5, 4 months out of surgery, and it's much better, except I still can't feel from like this part of my forearm and both of these fingers. So I'll have updates for that once I get back to the point when I'm in Canada, but I wanted to update that no, it did not come back right away. Okay, so now we're on Monday, which is day 51, and I'm very much gonna have to go off my notes and text messages. So this is part of a text message to my friend Nicole. I'm going to update you in real time because there's a lot happening. Greg was at the police station this morning, but the person he wanted to talk to had left, and they will be back at 11:30, so we are waiting. The mother just texted me, and she's coming to our town and wants to meet with me and Brian. Michelle told me that we would meet with her Wednesday afternoon. I asked if it could be tomorrow, but she's insisting. I called and told Greg, and he is talking with her now. I haven't messaged the mom back yet, but it's freaking me out that she's coming here. So yeah, I got a text message that she wanted to meet with us that morning and that she was already on her way there. And again, I was speaking to my lawyer, like, can we make this happen? Can we meet today? Can we meet tomorrow? And she was insisting that it be Wednesday, of course, because she had more information from the police station. And I just remember being furious about this. The last thing I wanted to do was say no, because all the previous week we had been told if we can just get this mediation done, then my husband can get out, and I didn't understand why they kept telling me to postpone and delay. So basically what I learned later is that whatever Michelle and Greg were doing at the police station, the person they were speaking to was saying that whatever plan was in action was going to happen on Wednesday, and that Wednesday was going to be a big day, and that we needed to wait for Wednesday before we communicated with the family further, which was extremely difficult. I hate this part of the story. And I didn't want to do it. I wanted to meet with her immediately. And so in the end, based on my lawyer's recommendation, I messaged her back and said that I still wasn't doing well and that I would get back to her on Wednesday. I think this part of the story is so hard because there was just so much going on, and so many things that we were being told that we couldn't tell people, even people back home and the family, obviously, and I just hated it. I didn't understand a lot of what was happening. I trusted the people that I was working with, but it just put me in a really awkward spot, and I just had to have faith that the right things were happening. I also wrote, I'm having major bag leak problems. I've had to do 6 changes in the last 2 days, including in the middle of the night. I'm running out of supplies. Luckily, the hospital had 5 more, so I'm shipping them here. So at this point I was running out of supplies, and I had messaged the hospital because, again, they did have some supplies in the hospital. They weren't the right supplies. They weren't the convex ones that had already been ordered from Amazon, but I was running out of supplies completely. So I had communicated with the hospital, and they had 5 bags, and I got those shipped down to my town, and I think it took about 2 days for those to arrive, but I made it. I had enough for those 2 days. Later on that day, I also texted her that I went to see Harrison at 2 and there was no boss, so they told me to come back at 6. I came back at 6 and the boss said it's too late and denied me. He was mean about it. My heart is breaking for him. I remember this day very clearly. I mean, there were a lot of days that I just went there, and like I said, every time you go to the police station, it's not like they're like, yes, you can see your husband, and they go let him out. It's usually you're just sitting there for up to hours at a time until somebody comes and speaks to you. And that's why I was bringing a pillow to the police station day after day. And because I couldn't sit in a chair, I was lying down on this really dirty police station floor. But if I had any hope in speaking to my husband, that's just what I wanted to do. Because again, I didn't know how many hours I would be there for. But this day in particular was just awful. Like, I got there at 2, and I think it was at least an hour that they waited just to tell me the boss wasn't there. I couldn't understand why they couldn't just tell me that when I got there. But they had told me to come back at 6, and this had been an ongoing thing where they would tell you to come back at a different time, and then I could end up seeing him. But this day I came back at 6, and the boss was there, and he was just so mean that day. I even remember another day, but my lawyer Michelle saying how they're basically bipolar, and I couldn't agree more, because some days the police chief or the boss or whoever was working would be in a good mood, and some days it would be like they were a completely different person, and this day he was a completely different person, and he was just like, why are you here at 6? Like, it's dark out. We're not letting anybody out to come talk to you. Like, just talk to me like I was crazy. And I was saying that I was specifically told to come back here at 6, and he's like, no, that's not happening. You can't see him. Try again tomorrow. So the next day was day 52. No update is written down. This was the Tuesday, so we were waiting for the Wednesday, so I don't think anything happened that day, but I do think I probably went back that day to see Harrison. So again, not much written down, but I'm guessing I saw him that day just to update him again on what was happening. So Wednesday, day 53, I texted my friend in the morning. I said she still hasn't responded. I'm referring to the mother at this point who I messaged on Monday. I'm going to message Michelle soon and ask if I should message her again. I'm going to visit Harrison today at 10, because again, it's visitation day. And I'm praying with everything I have that Harrison gets released or put on house arrest today. So that was also still in play at this point, that house arrest might be an option. House arrest in Nicaragua basically just means that, and I didn't know this for like the first month that he was in jail, but it's not actually like where he has to stay in his house. He just has to stay in the country. So if he got out on house arrest, he could, still go wherever he needed to within the country and work and all the things, but that he wouldn't be allowed to leave the country. But at this point, that was still a great option. If he could just get to that point, get out on house arrest and wait for a judge so that we could do mediation. This is such a complicated part of the story to explain, but basically at some point, I think in the morning, Hannah had gone back to the police station to speak to the person that she had a rapport with there, and to find out what was happening with this whole Wednesday situation and waiting for Wednesday. And we found out at this point that whatever this Wednesday plan was not playing out. But it was at this point that she found out that my husband's name was written down on a pardon list. And in Nicaragua, apparently on Nicaragua Mother's Day, a lot of prisoners are let out on pardons from the government, basically. So yeah, she found out at that point that his name was on the list for this, which is crazy. This is all crazy. But it wasn't a for sure. Just because he was on the list didn't mean it was a for sure. But if it did play out, again, it didn't play out this way. Spoiler alert. But if it did play out, basically he would be getting out free and clear on Mother's Day, and that there would be no judge involved. There'd be no mediation involved. He would just get out. And that was an absolutely crazy thought at this point. And I remember speaking to Greg about that, and he's like, if that does play out, you should still mediate with the family for a variety of reasons. And I absolutely agreed. But again, we weren't wanting to tell people these plans because we didn't want people to think we were trying to get him out without mediating. That was never the goal. I never not wanted to mediate with the family. I definitely still wanted to accomplish that. Obviously, I didn't want it to be more than I already had or the higher numbers, but I very much still wanted to mediate with the family. So anyways, at one point in time, that was a plan. Again, I'm not going into these plans in too much detail because a lot of them didn't end up playing out anyways, but I wanted to give you some context on the things that I felt I could talk about. That morning was the visitation day, and Michelle, my lawyer, came with me and was speaking to, I think Greg was there as well, actually. He must have been translating, but yeah, we were all there at mediation that morning. I'm just going to read you part of the voice memo that I sent to my friend. So Michelle was there this morning when I saw Harrison to update him. And she said that if the mother doesn't respond this afternoon, because again, we were still waiting for her to respond from Monday, that I wanted to meet on Wednesday, that I am to show up at the house tomorrow with Brian, which makes me incredibly uncomfortable. She wanted me to go myself, basically. If the mother didn't reply, she wanted me to show up at the house and say that I was ready to mediate. So because of plans changing on the Wednesday plan not working out, we were back on getting this mediation completed as soon as possible. And because she wasn't responding, that is what my lawyer suggested, and it absolutely freaked me out. She was also saying a lot about how she wanted me to stay on the number. She was very adamant about not going higher, that we were already far too high and that I needed to stay on the number and stay strong. And everybody I spoke to at this point who knew what was going on was saying exactly the same thing. Like, don't go higher. You need to stay at the number that you're at. And yeah, I just remember it freaking me out. Again, more of the voice memo that might give you more context. So whatever we were waiting on for Wednesday, for today, is not happening. But now there's this new pardon thing. Greg is claiming they'll know the names of the prisoners to be released hopefully by the weekend, but Mother's Day isn't till the 30th, which is 8 days away. So yeah, I'm basically sitting by my phone hoping that this mother replies to me so I can get in the car and go do this now, but I don't have high hopes because she's left me on red for a while. At this point, my anxiety was just really high because, again, I had postponed with her twice and I hadn't heard from her since Monday, and the last thing I wanted to do was show up at her house unannounced, and I was just a mess. I think I must have messaged the mother at some point that day in the afternoon, just asking her again if she'd like to meet today, and then I have written down at 2 o'clock that she texted me. And I was super grateful that she texted me and that she wanted to meet that day at 5 o'clock at her house. And I remember reaching out to Brian because I didn't want to go alone, and he already had a rapport because he'd been there through everything that we had been through, and he would be able to help us communicate as well. And he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to make it, and time was passing, and it was a very stressful moment because I didn't know if I was going alone or if he was going to come, but in the end he was able to come. I can't tell you how much I wish this story was already done, like I was done filming and it was already posted, because this is so hard to go through all of this. But I think we spoke to Michelle and let her know that we were going over there to mediate without her. And again, she was just reiterating that we needed to stay strong on our number, and that she was going to get the mediation paperwork completed with that original number, and that she would basically be on standby that evening for when we got things completed. Okay, so my neighbor Brian and I showed up at the house, at the mother's house that day at 5 o'clock, and we walked in and sat in the same area we sat when we originally met with them. And there was far less people in the house at this point. The mother was there. There was a sister who was there, a different sister from Rose. I had met her before when she was at the police station, and I don't think I need to give her a name, but she was there. And there was another older lady there as well. I'm not sure how she was related, but we were all sitting in a circle again. I remember Brian turning to me because we were all just quiet when we got in there, and basically said, like, how do you want to start? Because he was doing the translating, and I didn't know what to say at that moment, and basically just said that, you know, I don't know what to do from here. I don't physically have more money. I can't do the number that they're wanting. What would they like to do? That's when the mother said, basically, that's fine. This is the number we want instead, which was considerably less. It was only a few $1,000s more than the number we had originally agreed upon. And I remember immediately being like, yes, let's do that. I knew I could borrow more money from my mother. I knew that was like something achievable, and I was so relieved because, again, walking in there, I didn't know. Like, the last I had heard, they were standing strong on their number. When Brian and Greg had been there, they were standing strong on their number, and I didn't know how this was going to go at all. But she was immediately like, no, we can do this number, and it was something that I knew I could do. Brian was basically like, okay, like, that's great. Let's call Michelle the lawyer and get this signed tonight. Like, I'll let her know. And I don't know if I should talk about this part or not, but it's at this point that the mother brought up the car insurance. And again, that's something I spoke about in the beginning, how there is a sum of money that goes directly to the family in cases like this. And my lawyer had told me that sum of money is part of the mediation money. Like, that, how do I explain this? Like, if we came to a certain number, it was assumed that car insurance money was part of the number. And the mother was like, no, that's not. I want that in addition to the number we're coming to. So it was just a trying moment because it tacked on even more to what I thought the number was that we were talking about. But again, I was desperate to get my husband out of jail, and wanted to get this complete, and knew that we'd be selling our house, and that I would be able to pay my mother back with that money, and basically agreed. At this point, Brian ended up calling Michelle the lawyer to update her on what was happening, and that we were ready to sign, and that we had this new number. And I remember hearing that Michelle was very upset that we had gone higher because, of course, I had gone a little bit higher initially, and then the car insurance as well. And she had warned me, just stay where you're at. Like, you're already too high. You don't need to go any higher. And I had. And not only that, she had drawn up all the paperwork in her office earlier that day for a specific number, but because we were higher and she was at home at this point, she had to go back to her office to change all the paperwork. And I just remember Brian telling me that she was very angry. She also told Brian on the phone what information that the family needed to bring in, because at this point they still hadn't brought in the documentation that they were indeed the family and the documentation that the police station needed. So she was basically relaying the information they needed to bring in and to bring it to her office so that she could, I guess, photocopy it or whatever and send it in, and that we were all to meet at her office. And it was at this point that the sister decided to come along with us. So it was myself and Brian and the sister, and we all went to the lawyer, Michelle's office. On the way there, we were all under the assumption that they had the paperwork with them, and that Michelle was just changing the paperwork, and that we were going to sign. We were actually going to go back to the mother's house and because we needed her signature as well, but she wanted to stay back. So we were going to get this all done and then go back to the mother's house. And we were all under the assumption that she would sign and I would sign, and that would be done. So at some point when we were at Michelle's office, the plans changed. And she was basically like, we can't sign tonight. The signing actually doesn't occur until the money exchange happens. And that's going to be tomorrow morning. And I was absolutely shocked. And then it's at that point that she explained to me what the plan was for the next day. Basically, the next day we were all going to meet at the police station that my husband was being held at, and that Michelle, the lawyer, and the mother would be heading to the courthouse to sign the document and have it witnessed, I guess, at that point. But at exactly the same time, me and the sister would be at the bank sending the money. And she was explaining how the papers couldn't be signed until I sent the money. And I just remember being like, this doesn't sound right at all. Like, what? Like, this is a contract. Like, why can't we just sign now? If I'm signing, I'm saying I'm going to send you this money. Why would I send the money before the contract is signed by them? Like, it just made me feel really uncomfortable. Like, what if they changed their mind? What if they decided not to sign and I had sent the money? And I didn't understand the process, and they were trying to talk to me about how things work in Nicaragua and how this is very common, that these things happen at the same time. And at one point I was like, I don't want to send the money unless you sign, because I don't feel comfortable. And the sister was sitting there as well, and she's like, well, we don't want to sign until you send the money, because what if you back out? And it was just a super surreal moment and awkward. And luckily my lawyer was there and just kind of had to explain to me that this is how things work in Nicaragua, that this is very common. And the sister, again, not Rose, but the other sister, was just super lovely in this period of time. Like, she could see how unwell I was doing, and she could see how stressed out about the situation I was. And I remember her looking at me and saying, we're going to sign. We're not going to take your money and not sign. And I responded to her and said, I'm going to send the money. I'm not going to not send the money. And again, just a really surreal moment. And that's what happened that day. We didn't end up going back to the mother's house. I even remember talking to Brian, like, is this what's supposed to happen? Like, this doesn't seem right to me. And both him and Michelle were explaining to me that this is actually how it's supposed to go. Like, both these things happen at the same time, and that I just need to have trust. So basically the plan for the next day was that when I was at the bank with the sister, they'd be on the phone with the mom and my lawyer, who's at the courthouse. And as soon as confirmation was done that this money was sent, like as soon as that process was sent, they would immediately sign. Michelle then told me that I needed to stop at the police station on the way back home that day, and that I needed to speak to the boss. I needed to let the boss know what was going to be happening the next day, that we would all be showing up there at 8, and that we would be completing this mediation, and that basically we needed Harrison to be able to sign. Brian and I drove back to town, and again, I was just questioning everything at this point, because I just didn't understand. Like, if it was a contract, of course I was going to pay. I didn't understand why why I had to send the money before they signed. So that was basically the car ride. We arrived at the police station, and they told us that the boss wasn't there. And it was at this point that Brian explained to them the situation, because this was in the evening at this point, and the person at the desk was just like, the boss isn't here, like, I can't help you, basically. And Brian explained to him the situation, and he said, okay, hang on a sec and wait. So we sat and waited a while, and then the boss came out. So just another lie, just told that the boss wasn't there, but the boss was there the entire time. The boss came out, and we explained that we'd be there the next morning at 8 a.m. and that we needed him to sign, and he said okay. When I got home that night, I had conversations with my friend and my mom as well about everything that was happening, and they were also shocked, like, why is that the way this is going to happen? And I was talking more about selling the house and how I'll be paying my mother back with money from that. Okay, we're now on Thursday, day 54, and I feel like this video is already so long, but I also feel like I don't want to stop it right here. I want to tell you how that went the next day. Okay, so I have in my notes from this morning that I woke up at 4 a.m. to a bag blowout, which was just an ongoing theme at this point. It was constantly leaking, and that's when my day started. And at 8 a.m. we all met at the police station, and they didn't bring my husband out at this point. But again, my lawyer was there. So it was my lawyer, the mother, the sister, and myself. I think that's all who was there. And the lawyer just explained to the police what was going to happen that morning. So we left the police station. Myself and the sister went to my bank, and the mother and my lawyer went to the courthouse. And again, we were going to be on the phone at the time that the money switched over, and that's when she was going to sign. However, when we got up to the bank teller, they were saying because it was such a large amount of money that they weren't able to do the transfer. They needed some sort of documentation supporting the reason for this transfer. So the sister called the mom, I believe, who then spoke to the lawyer, and the lawyer had the documentation because she had the mediation paperwork. So they left the courthouse and they came to the bank. Once they got to the bank, the mother ended up going into like a private banking room with the banker with her bank info and the mediation paperwork from the lawyer. And then a lot of time went on. So I think we were there, it was probably around 9:30 at this point. We were all just waiting, basically waiting, because they had the paperwork, they had the bank info, both my bank info and her bank info, and we were just waiting for this to happen. And it was at that point that my lawyer told me that she had a court case that morning at 10 a.m. and that she actually had to leave. And again, it absolutely panicked me. I'm like, what do you mean you're gonna leave? I'm about to send a whole bunch of money and they haven't signed the paper yet. And anyways, she ended up calling Hannah and Greg and asked if they could come down to the bank, and because they knew everything that was happening, and basically be there as well. And she filled them in on everything that should happen with this bank transfer, and that we needed to go to the courthouse afterwards, and told them what needed to be done, and they came to the bank. Long story short, we ended up being in that bank for 4 hours. At some point the transfer did go through, so all the money had been sent to the family, but the mother was still in that room with the banker guy, and we later found out that she was opening a bank account because I guess she didn't work with this bank and wanted to work with this bank, and that's the process he had started, and that's why it was taking so long. And I just remember being just a mess because I knew the money had been transferred, and yet we were still sitting at the bank. The papers hadn't been signed. We were supposed to go to the courthouse. I didn't understand what was taking so long. So again, after more hours went by, the mother came out and said, this is taking too long. Let's go to the courthouse. She was going to leave the sister there to finish the opening of the bank account that they wanted to do. And she could see how stressed I was and wanted to go to the courthouse to get this signed. And we got in the car with, I don't even know how many people were there. It was my father-in-law, I think my mother-in-law, Greg and Hannah, and the mother as well. And we took 2 vehicles to the courthouse, which was in the same town that we were in. And I just remember the mother being super comforting in this car ride, and just reassuring me that like she's gonna sign, like she's not gonna walk away, she's gonna sign. They had the money, everything was gonna be okay. And we showed up at the courthouse, and basically in the end the courthouse told us that they could not oversee the signing of this. Something had changed in the time that my lawyer had been there this morning, and by the time that we got there that afternoon, they were not going to oversee the signing of this document. So the courthouse told us all that we needed to get this done in Revis at the office of the person who had already blocked our mediation twice before, the same lady who basically said she knows nothing about a mediation and we can't do it. It needed to be done there. And it was at this point that the decision was made that it would be the mother, my father-in-law, and Hannah, that they would go to Revis. I was really not doing well because, again, keep in mind, I'm still recovering from surgery. I can't sit for long periods of time. And I had just been in a bank for 4 hours. So I was a complete mess, and I had missed another window of medication because, again, I didn't think that this would take like 4 or 5 hours. And there was just no way I could have made it to Revis. So my father-in-law basically went in my place, and Greg ended up driving home myself and my mother-in-law, and we just sat at home and waited to hear what happened. I just remember being so panicked because I had sent this large amount of money and yet the paperwork hadn't been signed, and that the courthouse wasn't letting us sign. I felt good in the way that the mother was speaking to me. She seemed very genuine, and you know that she was going to sign. She was not going to walk away, but that was just the longest hours waiting. In the end, it did end up getting signed. They ended up going to all these different places that day, starting with the place that the courthouse recommended, who denied them again for a third time. They ended up going back to the police station, and the person at the police station was super upset that this person had denied us again. And basically, in the end, told us to just have a notary witness that she signed, and the mother signed the mediation papers. So this was a huge relief. Mediation at this point was complete. I had sent the money, they had signed the papers, we had the documentation that mediation was complete. This person at the police station was then going to send these completed papers to a bunch of different other offices, showing them that we had completed mediation. But however, since there was no judge, he was still going to be in jail, and could anybody help us? Like, here's the paperwork. We also still knew at this point that he was on this pardon list, and that if these people didn't accept this paperwork and let us complete this without a judge, that there was still that hope for the following week that he was on this pardon list. So yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave it for this video. There were other random side tangents as well. They weren't relevant to what was happening, but this was a big day. This is the day that you know, we officially got mediation done, and was super hopeful that one way or another with this done, my husband would get out of jail.